Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic writer Arvid Nelson, who is the creator and writer of Rex Mundi, along with working for Dark Horse and Dynamite, to name a few. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, I am very excited. And I sort of just tipped off my hat a little bit and where I want to go with this interview, because those are the three main components of your career and who you have written for. But I am curious, before we start diving into it, and in particular Rex Mundi, how did you get involved in writing comics, and what was that journey like? Because I know it's interesting for you.
Yeah, I was in a band in college. I've always liked music. I thought we were really good. The guitarist was just so talented. He was from Latin America. I was learning Spanish. I thought we were doing really interesting things, mixing up punk rock and traditional Latin American music, and I got kicked out of the band. So that was it still hurt. It's funny because it's just a stupid college band, but it really came to mean something more to me. I don't know, your last year of college, I was certainly like looking for direction in my life, and I thought that I really believed in it. So I fell in with a group of people, with a new group of friends, and I'd always liked comics, and we said to ourselves, why don't we do a comic book club at our college, and we'll make a comic book, and we'll get the college to pay for it. And that's what we did. And it was one of the happiest times in my life, just staying up until 4 a.m. every day, making comics, learning about how using the software. We had this little internecine struggle, this little I don't know what you want to call it, this little rivalry with the humor magazine. They were not very funny people. We had to share the equipment with them. Yeah, and they did not like us sharing their equipment. So of course it was warfare between the both of us. But we were like Roadrunner or Speedy Gonzales or something like that, just like running circles around them. In my mind, anyway. And then, 1 year after, actually not 1 year, towards the end of that year, my friend Billy, who was doing it with me, said, why do we have to stop? We're all graduating in a few months. Let's move to New York City and start a comic book publishing empire. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a great idea.
So how did that even come about, and even just that idea, and what happened moving to New York City and getting into comics? Because at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, the bubble just happened in the comic book world, from my understanding, where Image overprinted a bunch of stuff with Malibu, and then there was like that bubble, and then comics were starting to come back.
Oh, yeah.
Out of bankruptcy and all that stuff. And like, it was kind of, I guess, a great reset. Mm-hmm. But also there was still collateral damage happening. And so what happened from there? Because obviously it was an interesting time in comics.
Now, I will never forget my first year at the San Diego Comic Book Convention. We were right next to Rob Liefeld, who's one of the original Image creators. Very nice guy. I actually liked him a lot. But I knew nothing about the history of Image Comics at that time. I mean, I was a total babe in the woods. All of that stuff that had happened with Image Comics, it had already happened and sort of bottomed out by the time I was getting into it. So I was completely ignorant of it and learned about most of it kind of after the fact, to be honest. While living in New York, I was working on a few like film sets. I was considering getting into film at the same time. I very quickly realized, wow, that's not what I want to do. The way filmmakers suffer. It's just making a film is so expensive, and you depend on so many people to get it done. So while this comic book idea was going on, I was just looking at more and more the difficulties of trying to get a film made, especially the kind of stories that I like. I have always gravitated towards science fiction and fantasy and that kind of stuff. So for me, comics were just a really pragmatic way to tell the stories that I wanted to tell without spending, $130 million.
Yeah, a comic is much cheaper. Even though comics technically aren't the cheapest platform to produce, making a comic book or a graphic novel is significantly cheaper than making a television show or
That's
making a movie. I mean, by far, I want you can make a comic book on the expensive end, maybe 20 grand on the expensive end, like the ultra high. Making a movie, I mean, we're talking on the cheap end at least. I mean, technically on the cheap end, you could probably do it for like 50,000 if you're bootstrapping everything. But in reality, I mean, 3 million to 5 million is sort of, I guess, where it is on the super cheap end. So obviously there's a big difference between those numbers. And so obviously, how did you start writing your first book? And I think your first book was Rex Mundy. That's
right. That's right. Yeah. I went to, as one of my film little escapades in film, I went to Paris. There's this literary journal magazine called The Paris Review. It's still around, I think. That goes to show how interested I am in high culture, haute couture. But it's an English language literary magazine. It was, and I think still is, pretty influential. It was like in the 1950s, like the Beat generation. I think a lot of writers like I think Allen Ginsberg was published by them, so they were really influential in the 1950s. You know, the beginning of the counterculture in the 1960s and all that stuff. So I was there through my father. Actually, my father was on the board of this film foundation, and they were doing a documentary on the Paris Review. So there I was in Paris, just as like a total jerk, like a total useless. I was a production assistant, but I was just like carrying film bags and cameras all over Paris. So there I was in front of like Saint-Sulpice, this incredibly beautiful cathedral, standing outside, just looking at it while they went in and shot their little, shot the little scene or whatever, standing with the bags. So just to get for like, you know, like a week, just me standing outside Paris like a jerk with all these film bags. So I thought, wow, what would it be like to actually go inside these places? And I will never forget the church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, which is in, I can't even remember where it is now, but one of the people I was with on the crew, or one of the like entourage, we were having coffee or something like that. She saw me looking at the church. I said, she said, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "It was built in the 800s by the Normans." And I was just like, whoa, it's like it's over 1,000 years old. I mean, you know, living in the United States, if something's older than 30 years, it's like ancient history. And yeah, I just had this idea. That's when Rex Mundy first came into my head. This idea of a world which is very modern, but also very, very ancient at the same time. So,
and let's talk about Rex Mundy. For those who don't know, and I'm sure you're going to fill in some parts that I missed of the basic concept. It's kind of a murder mystery for the Holy Grail that a bunch of political powers, including the Catholic Church, which is still in power, and several monarchies are still in power in 1933. And basically, we have this Dr. Julian, and I'm probably going to get his name wrong, Sonnier. And so he winds up getting and starts investigating this lost scroll that's supposed to lead to the Holy Grail out of this church. And well, pretty much he gets caught up in this gigantic, I guess, political battle for power. And he might want the power, and then other people want the power, and then his ex-girlfriend somehow gets involved in it. And she might be on his side, she might be on somebody else's side. And we get this idea of a lot of stuff happening with this. And we sort of get the question, what is the Holy Grail at this point? What is that power? What is the secrets surrounding it and everything in between? So obviously that's a very general shotgun approach to this story, because we're going to dive into parts of it in a second here. But I'm sure you're going to fill in some other things that I missed.
No.
It gets really, really in depth over about 38 issues.
Yeah.
So where did this entire idea come from? Obviously, going even further off, you just seeing a church and being like, hey, what would it be like if we had something set in modern times to some degree? And I think, 80, 90 years ago isn't too far back, but also went back further, because this book does, and this series does go back further than that.
Yeah. First I should mention, yeah, it is very similar to the Da Vinci Code. I wrote Rex Mundi before Da Vinci Code came out, so I don't mind comparisons, but when people say I ripped off the Da Vinci Code, it's not really, it's just factually inaccurate. I thought it was a really, really interesting kind of conspiracy theory, all these Holy Grail conspiracy theories. There was this book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which came out in the early 1980s. It was the primary inspiration for Dan Brown, and one of my primary inspirations as well. I just thought it was a totally fascinating idea. Religion has always interested me. I'm religious myself. Even if I weren't, I just think it's fascinating to learn what different people believe, and the truth claims of religions. There is a long tradition of mysticism in the West, which is based partially on it's partially based on Jewish mysticism. There's Christian mysticism. There's Neoplatonism, and all these things just kind of come together in a really fascinating way in Christianity. And it feels it's like real magic. It feels so much more real, more palpable, like a kind of magic than what you might see in like a typical fantasy story. So that was really important for me also. Like, what if these Hermetic traditions, these esoteric mystical traditions, were actually literally true, and people actually really could have like magical powers because of these ideas. So yeah.
And there's a lot more going on, because obviously we have the Catholic Church has massive power at this point, and that power hasn't been, I guess, dismissed as in, what history has shown, because obviously all throughout the 1900s, and even dating back a little bit, starting at the late 1800s, the Catholic Church was losing a lot of power. Yeah. And they were losing it very, very quickly as monarchies wanted to do whatever they wanted, and they needed the blessing of the church. And anybody who knows history understands that. And so we have that in there. We also have magic in there as well, and we have sorcery, and we have some dark ritual stuff in there. And so obviously we have a lot to play with this. And obviously we have the Holy Grail, which is granting power to people as well. And so we get all of that. And so there's a lot of fun stuff going in there. But the reason why I like Rex Mundi, and I've only read the first 5 issues so far, so I'm the first person to say that I obviously spoiled it to prep up for this interview. I do want to make that crystal clear that I'm very well informed on what happens. Yeah. But it's this idea that we could take out the magic, and we could take out other things in the sorcery and even the dark ritual stuff. And it is a game of politics. It's a game of power. It's very much a lot of stuff. I don't want to say it's cat and mouse, but it is a game of strategy in many ways on what's going on with this. And obviously Julian is sort of playing that to some degree. And so what was it like even building out Julian? Because he goes through a bunch of stuff between investigating and dealing with the guild. The Catholic Church is sort of putting pressure on him as a doctor and dealing with him as a guild member and trying to get him kicked out of the guild. And then obviously all these obstacles and cracking codes, dating, going to Jerusalem with a rabbi and figuring out what's going on with that. And so we get a bunch of stuff going on with this, and new allies appear, allies that now become enemies, and all sorts of crazy stuff. So what was that looking to play with all that stuff?
Yeah, one of the challenges I wanted to give myself writing the story is, okay, you need to have a detective, like a detective character who's not part of he's not connected with the powers that be the way that like Sherlock Holmes is. The Scotland Yard always comes to Sherlock Holmes with the cases that they can't crack. So that's one of the challenges I wanted to give to myself. It's one of the things that I love about a writer called Raymond Chandler. He's Philip Marlowe is his great character. Philip Marlowe is a private eye, and like everyone hates him. Everybody hates Philip Marlowe. The gangsters hate him. They want him dead. The cops hate Philip Marlowe. So he's always walking a fine line between the gangsters and law enforcement. So that was really the idea behind the story, was to try to create a character like that, a very American anti-hero who's not really, he doesn't really have any support from anybody. So you take out the gangsters and replace them with, cultists and sorcerers. You take out the cops and you replace them with the Holy Inquisition. And that was the idea behind the story. Yeah.
And even Julian's interactions with Inquisitor more Secant, I want to say, or I'm probably getting that name wrong. Even his relationship throughout the entire series with the Inquisitor and all that, and how there are moments of some dark humor in there, and then there's obviously torture and all sorts of crazy stuff, and even just Julian's even just drive to get to the truth, and understand the truth is just so like pure. I mean, not to ruin anything. I think it's been out for a long time that if you haven't read it, I'm about to ruin stuff. And if you have a Comixology subscription, you can actually read it on there. It's part of Unlimited, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
It would be how I'm reading it.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting a sponsor by Comixology, but I should be. But anyhow, one of the things is that even his just pure for the truth and seeking it is just amazing how he's willing to torture so that he can know what this scroll is and what this Holy Grail is, and even just his sense of justice, saying, hey, I can't let these people go out and kill a bunch of people to get power. I mean, I love all of this where we dive into that. So, like, what is that like to just have a character who's willing to sacrifice, but also does sort of win to some degree?
Yeah, I think Julian is motivated by all those things. And I think it's one of the things that comes across really powerfully about Philip Marlowe. Philip Marlowe, for all of his problems, has a very, very, very stable sense of justice. And he never deviates from it, He's going to find out the truth, and he doesn't really care about what anyone thinks. He's going to find out, and nothing's going to stop him. I think there's another aspect to Julian's personality and character. I hope anyway, where it's just it's something to do. It gives him identity and meaning and purpose in his life. He stumbles onto something, and isn't that what everyone looks for in their life? How do I give meaning to my life? And it's something that feels really meaningful to him as just as a human being trying to figure out the existential realities of existence. So,
and I also think obviously his best friend sort of gets killed, and admits to this at the very early on. He also wants that justice, where I think it even goes further, saying, "Hey, I stumbled onto something, but I also now have to. I don't want to get avenged, but I now need to find out who killed my friend, and I now need to go fix and make that component right as well." And obviously, and even going further with Julian, obviously the Duke of Lorraine, is a great foil for Julian, even though, and it's very much like Kirk and Khan in Star Trek, where they don't come face to face until the very last scene and the last first part of the book, where they're sort of playing against each other, not to ruin anything, but obviously Julian is uncovering certain connections between the Duke of Lorraine and the missing scroll and the Holy Grail. And obviously maybe the Duke of Lorraine has some influence over what's happening and preventing Julian from getting this. And then we throw Guinevere in there as well. And that's all complicated because obviously Guinevere is getting intimate with the Duke. And the Duke is not the greatest person in the world, obviously sort of cheating on his wife. And with Guinevere, and then obviously he's not great with his daughter, and so we get all this stuff going on. And so what is that like? Because also Guinevere is with Julian at the same time, and that adds a lot of stuff. And we get this crazy, I don't want to say a love triangle, but we get who's playing who, how are they playing whose motives are who has power, and how is this entire power game being played out with intimacy. And obviously Julian's ex-girlfriend is Guinevere. So obviously that's kind of a crazy circumstance in the middle of uncovering what could be the biggest rock to the entire Catholic Church and to Europe for that matter.
Yeah, right. It's not a love triangle. It's a love pentagram. I think when you're writing stories, for me anyways, it's really, really important to have a human element to it. That's 100% right. Julian is motivated because his best friend has been killed. And that's I think good writing always does that. It can't all be about truth and justice and the American way, and all that stuff is great, and I'm not discounting it, but yeah, I think there's a love triangle is always an interesting way of complicating things, and Genevieve is very much that playing between both sides, and the Duke's daughter is also looking for something as well. And I really tried. I hope I'm sympathetic to everybody and everything when I write, even to villains. I don't consider Rex Mundy to be anti-Catholic or anti-Christian or anti-religion or like anti-anything. It's never been my intention. I don't hate the Catholic Church. I think the Catholic Church does more damage to itself than I ever could. So,
to even go off of that though, because obviously not to ruin much of the Duke, but the Duke, I don't think anybody minus Julian is good in this book. I honestly think Julian as a character is a pretty decent character. It doesn't make the best decisions, but collectively overall, I think Julian is a pretty decent guy. I don't think Isabel is a bad person either. I think, though, if we had to rank people, obviously Julian would be first, Isabel would be second, and Guinevere and the Duke would be down, but I don't think they would be in the 50% category. So anything below 50%, you're pure evil. And you're going downward that way. I think everybody is above 50% because, not to ruin it, but the Duke basically starts a war, and he wants to spill blood, and his entire concept is to reunite Europe. And go down to, I think, Charlemagne, back to Charlemagne and all that stuff, which might not necessarily be the wrong move, technically speaking, where he wants to unite Europe and conquer Europe and have I guess, a kingdom and fulfill his legacy that his ancestors and further family members of Lorraine have wanted to achieve for 2,000 years. So he's not acting for the sake of killing. He actually has a mission. And so it's super interesting when we get into that, because now, okay, there's a justification. You might not like it because you're on side A, but side B is not evil to the extent because they're trying to achieve something that they think is going to better off Europe in the future. So that's really interesting, especially because you say that you try to be sympathetic to every character. Well, there we go. And then we also get craziness coming into this entire book too.
Mental illness, 100%. In my personal belief, I don't think evil people ever say, I am evil and I will destroy you. They say, you are evil and I will destroy you. That's what evil people say. Hitler thought he was doing the world a favor. And that's what's really scary about him. The whole idea of Charlemagne and reuniting the Empire of Charlemagne, that is 100% exactly the argument that the Nazis made when they occupied France. They said, we are reuniting the Empire of Charlemagne. Our two people are one, and now we're together again. And isn't that such a beautiful thing? Scary. It's scary because it's seductive. I mean, if it weren't seductive, people would reject it. No one would actually follow the Prince of Darkness. But Satan doesn't reveal himself as Satan. He always comes to you as a friend. So, 100%. I think all the great film villains do that. Darth Vader. What's his argument to Luke? Look, the world is a mess. Things are a mess right now, Luke. Like, you're against the Empire? We're giving people safety and security.
And look at Han Solo. The Empire gave him a job, and look at what he did.
Exactly right. You betrayed us. You're a betrayer, right. You're the betrayer, not us. You're the bad guy, right? Exactly.
And then Vader sits down Han, and what does Han do? After he got a job, he shoots at the dinner table.
That's right, exactly.
And Vader still invites him to have a seat.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I think that dark light duality is great, and is the dark side. I love the way Yoda says it the best. Look, I can't listen, Luke. Here's how it is. You have to make the choice yourself, Luke. It's up to you. It's up to you.
And so even going off of this, because obviously that's kind of where the first 18 issues end,
Yeah.
is that we are at war
Yeah.
now, essentially, where the Duke pretty much took over France,
Yeah.
pretty much slayed Louis. That more or less. I think it's a pretty safe assumption. Or the Duke's in control of France,
Right.
and he's now starting a war with Germany / the Persians.
Right.
And but I believe that Julian and Guinevere have either the location of the Grail or have the Grail, and they're on the run. And now we get this entire situation where now the Duke is in a position where he's losing his mind.
Right.
And things are sort of going bad for the Duke, but then things start turning around, and then he needs to find it, and then Guinevere, sort of something happens with her, and then she disappears, and Isabella's with a baron, and not everything as it seems with that baron. And so all sorts of stuff starts coming out, and everything just starts moving super quickly to the final confrontation between Julian, the Grail, the castle of the Grail, who's playing who comes and wakes up, who kind of gets off the Kool-Aid, per se, I think is a good way. Who's not in the cult anymore? It's a good one. I think the Catholic Church is also raising, oh snap, we're not going to be in power because the Duke doesn't care about religion. He cares about power, and we get that entire position thrown into this. And so we get a lot of stuff. And also, and the other thing that's super interesting is that this was after this series left Image and got picked up by Dark Horse.
Yep.
Which is a whole different bottle. So obviously I want to tackle the story side of all of this first.
The story definitely, there is a radical change in tone midway through the story. It becomes less of a detective story, becomes more of a
action, fast pass, absurdity a little bit. It becomes way more I feel warlike, aggressive-like. I feel like the entire tonality of the entire story, from what I've sort of read and spoiled for myself, I will be the first to admit it. But just even from Comic Vine and picking that up, you can immediately figure out that this story on issue 18, 19, and then move forward all the way to the end, it's faster paced. There's more consequences now. For what's about to happen. Before, we're just trying to figure out what's going on, and now it's, oh snap, if he's going to unite all of Europe and then conquer the world, and there's power, and also he's losing his mind, and now power might have to be stopped. I was just watching, I don't know if you're familiar with Ruby.
No.
They not to ruin it, but basically there was this character who wants to stop this evil and is going to go to no end lengths to stop it. Evil in this position, and basically all these characters come to the realization in the last episode that they have to stop and then imprison him because his power's gone out of check. And that's what I feel like the end of Rex Mundi is really aimed at, is where now it's become evidently clear that before the Duke's power was in check, and even when he was attempting to unite Europe, it was in check per se to some degree, but now we're getting to that stage where it has to be checked even further.
Yeah, that's right. When I knew it was a risk doing it. It's something I always intended for the story. It's a tactic that's as old as the hills. Storytellers have been doing that for like the past 10,000 years. That dramatic pivot halfway through. I knew it was a risk, and I hope it worked. At the very end of the story, I think the ending of the story, people have expressed dissatisfaction with it. I hope I succeeded. I was really happy with the ending, if I do say so myself, but ultimately readers judge these things, right? Authors don't judge them. So, I always defer to readers on everything. I know for me personally, my favorite endings are the kinds of endings that it's like tennis. It's like the writer, the author swats the ball back to you, the reader, and says, okay, what do you think? And that's what I'm going for. I think the ending hit certain people the right way, and I think it hit
others the wrong way, and also obviously even just talk about tone change and all that stuff. So one of the things that I think was interesting, because obviously whenever you start switching it up and that you take it, because I mean, first 18 issues, wow, I can't speak today. First 18 issues I felt were very Shakespearean.
Yep.
And we're very much done in that nature. And then I felt, it was kind of the last or the second half was sort of all hell broke loose. The last like two scenes of Julius Caesar is when, the raging war and Octavian are going at it.
Right.
And we have Mark Antony shacking up with Cleopatra, in Egypt, right? No, not the singer or the actor. I want to make that perfectly clear. You dated Cleopatra at some point. Anyhow, it wouldn't be if I would take that bet. At some point, I'd probably be right. But anyhow, I digress. One of the things, that's how I view the last like 20 issues of Rex Monday is the last two chapters or scenes of Julius Caesar. Yeah. And to make things even more complicated is that you now left Image or got kicked out of Image. And there's a lot of reasons why Image wasn't the company that it is today.
Yeah.
They didn't have the same infrastructure.
Right.
Image, I believe you were in debt. Also, creator owned is very complicated. Image wasn't making money with the book, or they weren't happy with the direction of the book. Maybe you weren't happy with them. Maybe a change of scene. Maybe the readership for Image wasn't there because The Walking Dead was just starting to get in to them, and they were maybe 3-4 years in with Kirkman coming in and obviously shifts in that. And then you went to Dark Horse. Mm-hmm. And I think Dark Horse had a lot more infrastructure at that point. I think Dark Horse, obviously, with Sin City, had some movie stuff and some other stuff in there and some other commercial properties. And Image now has that stuff. Fast forward, 17 years later.
That's right.
But at that time, I think that there was a lot of stuff going on. So what was that like? Because now you have a massive tone shift.
Yeah.
You've now left a company where your fan base is in. You're at a new company. This company seems to be championing this and saying, hey, we're sort of launching a new initiative, is how it was sort of built around you as a writer and bringing you in and saying, hey, we're sort of launching a bunch of new comics. Mm-hmm. And what was that all like? Because now you're about to get an influx of new fans. You might be retaining some old fans coming over, and you might be losing some people at the same time. And now the story is also, as I stated, massively changing.
That's right. The hardest thing, but by far and away, by orders of magnitude, the hardest thing for me was parting ways with the original artist. And this all happened around the same time. It's funny. There was not exactly the same time that I switched from Image to Dark Horse, but Eric J is the original artist for this comic for Rex Mundi. We suffered a lot together. We have a really powerful bond that transcends friendship. I mean, we're more like brothers from another mother. So parting ways with him, I think it was the right decision for both of us. But wow, that was hard. Wow, that was hard. And I was left in a situation with I didn't know if the comic was going to continue at that point. I thought this might be it if I don't find another artist. If you don't have an artist, you don't have a comic book. So not only is there a change in tone, there's a change of artists halfway through. It was that was not planned. It happened to coincide with this change in tone, but that's just kismet or serendipity or just synchronicity, whatever you want to call it. I'm so grateful to Juan. I'm also really good friends with Juan Ferreira, the artist who ended up finishing Rex Mundi. So it's just by the grace of God that I met him and that it worked out with him. And I am so unbelievably grateful to him for having finished Rex Mundi and having poured so much of his heart and soul into it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously coming into Dark Horse, you're very, very, because Dark Horse is weird, where Dark Horse is sort of creator owned, but also not creator owned and things of that nature. And they have like a combination of both of that stuff. And Image is creator owned completely. Right. And Image, for those who don't know, is that if you have a comic book and you get into Image, you are in debt to Image first and foremost.
Right.
And if you're not selling enough, you're in debt, and legitimately it can collapse your entire business.
Yeah.
I think people don't understand that, and I don't know what it was like back in 2002 to 2006 before you left Image,
Yeah.
but obviously that's how it is today, and it's very few books. Like, I don't think Saga Image is worried about, and I don't think that Brian K. Vaughan or Fiona Staples with Saga is in debt. I don't think The Walking Dead is in debt, but I would imagine some people who have signed up with Image, and they might not publicly say, but they might say, hey, I made $100 on this entire project,
Right.
Or I'm legitimately in debt to Image, and it's a disaster and that's why I only did 4 issues with Image, since they might say. So obviously that's something I don't know what it was like at Dark Horse, but what was that entire structural change and all that stuff, and then throwing stuff at you, and even the infrastructure and getting it out there, because I would imagine that because you were touted, and I say this with how it was read, where boom, now you're coming in.
Right.
Arvid's coming in to Dark Horse from Image with this massive series. We're going to finish it here. We're going to now publish parts of this, and obviously at some point, all this is going to be published under Dark Horse.
Right.
And now you're coming in sort of hot into Dark Horse, and almost as an acquisition and as a big talent. And I don't want to say your ego was boosted, but to some degree, I felt like they were boosting your ego coming into it, and also they were marketing it in a certain way.
Definitely. What can I say except now so many years later, I'm like Samuel Taylor Coleridge said, I'm a wiser and a sadder man. I think that I have met so many wonderful people at Dark Horse. There are so many phenomenal people there. I think it's a wonderful company. In some ways, looking back on it, hindsight is 20/20. In some ways, I might have been better off staying with Image Comics. I don't know. I mean, it's counterfactual. I have to say that I think Image Comics is absolutely unique. And what they do and what they provide for creators, there's nothing like it anywhere else in any other industry, let alone comics.
I mean, the closest thing is Kickstarter right now. That is legitimately the closest thing to Image.
That's right. But Image has access to the direct market and the previews, and you have a pipeline into comic book stores.
Not for long, according to my last interview. Not for long.
Really?
Put money on that. On the indie front, I think Image is going to have serious competition in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, it is such a fluid situation right now. It is such a fluid situation. We'll see what happens, won't we? We'll see what happens. I'm working on a new project right now. I would be pleased as punch to have Image Comics publish it. Nothing would make me happier. You own 100% at Image. We were working on some film stuff. We had some interest from some film companies. I asked Image to sign a release, just renouncing any claim. Boom, like within 2 hours, boom, they had signed everything they needed to sign. Yep, we don't own it, it's yours. They stand behind what they say about creator rights and ownership rights. They stand behind that 100%. So I am enormously fond of Image. And in a lot of ways, I'm sad that I left them. I hope I didn't burn any bridges. I love Image. It was a really difficult decision.
I don't think you have. I think very few creators have burned bridges with Image. Yeah. I think people in Image understand business is business, and that things leave all the time. I mean, there have been books that were done under Image, like Bang Tango, that then were picked up by Vertigo, and there's been things on Vertigo that have then been published by Image. And so I don't think anybody takes it personal.
Yeah,
and I hope they wouldn't. Because I think Image understands business. Yeah. But I do think there are people who have burned bridges. And look, Image has done things to also burn bridges with certain people.
It's true. Thank you. This is great, Andrew. You're my therapist. You're my comics therapist. We should talk more often.
We all know who I'm talking about. What individual who's no longer with us, and it's a shame that he's no longer with us. that person and that company he created has a very, very bad relationship with Image.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I'm so clueless about all this stuff. So
Everybody knows who I'm talking about.
Okay, except for me.
Everybody knows who I'm talking about, and it's not a secret.
Okay.
But I digress right there. But even coming to Dark Horse, because obviously that's big, and obviously Dark Horse at the time was becoming bigger, and obviously they have all this talent, and what was that like? And also you were not just coming to Dark Horse just to finish this series. You got some other stuff to work with as well.
Yeah, I did. I wish my relationship with Dark Horse had panned out better. Again, I met so many wonderful people there. There was a movie thing going on with Rex Mundi. That was all going on in the background. Johnny Depp, of all people, expressed interest.
And so what was that like? Because obviously now you have this movie concept being thrown out there, and people are like, oh, let's see what we can do with this, and let's see what happens, and let's see, where this is going. And even just the thought of taking what is from a comic book that you created into a movie is such a cool concept. And obviously, I'm assuming this was, 2006, 2007, 2008-ish? Maybe 2009-ish?
Even earlier. I mean, it was under wraps for a long time. So I think it's...
Because this was premature, very, very premature to what it is in 2021. Where now every comic property automatically has to be assumed that a movie is coming. And I come from the comic book investor side of all of this. So when I see a cool title and I read the title and I read the description, I buy accordingly on certain things. And is this going to be a movie, or can it be a movie? I have an Old Guard comic. That's a Netflix thing. I was like, oh, this is a cool concept. I wanted the first issue. Now that it's a thing on Netflix, that affects the value. And I know it sounds messed up when I'm saying that I buy and sell comics, but everything now, and when we're talking 19 years ago, it's kind of a premature thing. So obviously, what was that like for you? That even thought, and you're in the middle of creating this series, because I would imagine that it definitely makes you feel good.
Man, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It was bewildering. It was strange. It was wonderful. It was this enormously complex, complicated, emotional roller coaster ride that sort of played itself out week to week and month to month. It was fascinating following Johnny Depp's career, because he got interested. So it was even before the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie came out. So he went from being, a legitimate movie star to being the #1 movie star in the entire frickin' planet. I mean, #1. And it's been sad to see his star go into decline. Really, really sad and painful to me. I really wish that, we wrote, there were 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different scripts that were written. The scripts just never got to a place where people felt like they were comfortable moving forward with the project, which is really sad to me. Actually, what ended up happening at the very end, and it's sad because it was like a little too late. It was Sam Sarkar, who's a producer at Johnny Depp's company. He himself, on his own gumption, on his own pluck and reserve and grit, just wrote a version of a Rex Mundi screenplay. And I read it. I was just like, Sam, you wrote this? Yeah, I wrote it. Wow, it was the first time that I felt like there was a glimmer of something to hold on to. Basis for a movie. But at that point, it was, I think things had gone on too long at that point, and the powers that be had lost their patience. So, yeah.
Well, we're in the age now in 2021 where content is now being consistently sought after, and obviously Justice League, the Snyder Cut is killing it on AT&T, and Warner Bros. wants that, and obviously at this stage in the game, Zenescope is now entering TV and doing stuff. Obviously, Van Helsing, which they created on Sci-Fi, is doing well, and I'm sure they're getting into that game. I mean, if you're into, obviously Disney Plus, the Daily Wire, if you're conservative, is now starting to produce movies. So, I mean, we're in the age now where legitimately everybody is producing content, and things from 20 years ago are now going to be sought after to produce. So I would never say never, because it is clear to me that things have shifted because of COVID, and that content production is going to get cheaper and it's going to get better. And I don't think people want to go back to the movies anytime soon or ever, because I want everything on my computer, my TV, my iPad. And and people are going to be binging content like crazy, and they're going to run out of stuff, which means that everything that was produced 20 years ago that didn't get an opportunity to get something done is going to get something done.
I couldn't agree more. And I would not be a comics writer if I weren't an incurable optimist. So never say never. I believe in Rex Mundi 100%. Who knows what the future holds? I maintain hope for the future. So yeah. So 100, Andrew, 101%, 101%. We shall see.
And then obviously there's some more stuff with Rex Mundi. Obviously, Brother Matthew, and that's some fun stuff in there. And obviously you get to see a more enjoyable side of the Inquisitor, which is always fun. And that was online, which is cool. And kind of going back to what I feel was the roots of Rex Mundi and getting that stuff in there. So what was that like, getting to play with that and having a story that's set much, much, much more in the past that doesn't have to do with anything with Julian or anybody per se, and just getting to, explore some of the horrific side of the Catholic Church. And I know you're religious. I know you don't hate the Catholic Church, but obviously the Catholic Church has a lot of darkness in it.
It does, like God knows it's complicated. So I don't think it's a writer's job. I don't think it's a good idea actually for writers to take political sides on things. I think writers when writing is at its best, it presents just the situation as it is, and it helps you to understand it, the reader, as how complicated it is. The situation is complicated, and the better your understanding of something is, the better all of our understandings of something is, the more we can move forward and the world can be a better place. So that's 100% what I believe about writing. To the extent that writers have a political duty, it's nothing more than that. Just show people the underlying complexity of it and try to humanize everybody. And so that was the intent with Brother Matthew. Part of it is to show, the Inquisition, the Holy Inquisition, it has problems. It's not, yikes. But it's not all bad. So there's a sympathetic character. He's a young monk. He's an inquisitor, but he's actually doing, good things. It was the idea behind it was just purely as a way of getting the word out about Rex Mundi. And Eric J and I were religious about it. Every week we would put out an episode of it. And Andrew, I will never forget. I was coming out of the Rocky Horror Picture Show in New York City. I went into the Forbidden Planet. This was in Union Square. That's Forbidden Planet's a big comic book store there. And I know Jeff.
I know where it is.
Yeah. So I'm friends with Jeff, the buyer. I hope he's still there. I haven't spoken to him in a long time. This is a long time ago, but it was like 2 a.m. He just happened to be, it's New York City, so he happened to be there. It was open, of course. And Rex Mundi had just come out, and I said, Jeff, where's my comic? I don't see it on the, he said, you'd order some, bro. What? And he said, yeah, we're all sold out. I thought, well, you didn't, what, you said you'd support me. He says, yeah, I tried to get some more, but I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't get any more? Was there a problem with the distributor? Like, did it get lost? Did it get turned into toilet paper? He said, no, Arvid, you don't understand. It's sold out. Sold out, Arvid. You sold out your comic. I was just like, oh.
See, but that's a good problem. So
that's right. Exactly right. No, exactly right. I was just like,
I'll give you the opposite side of the problem. So David Booher, who does Canto, was on, and Canto 1 comes out, and this is probably the exact opposite of your problem, where Canto 1 comes out, and Canto 1 was a big spec book, meaning everybody was like, oh man, this book is the hot. This is like the it book. I got my copy. I didn't even read it, right? So now what we were speaking about this is that, and he's not going to mind me saying because it's live up out there right now, is that, well, what do you do when nobody's reading your book, but everybody bought your first issue, and that now you have a second issue coming out? What do you do? Because that's probably not what happened with Rex Mundy, because the speculation market on it wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
And so now people are actually reading your work and it's sold out and people want it more. And now you have the problem of, okay, what do we do now? Because now 1,500 people want it and legitly they can't get it, which is great because it means that the book is hot and people are interested in it. And that sends a message to the publisher, whether that's Image or Dark Horse, that, hey, we got a good problem here.
Right. It's, we didn't have any commitment from Image beyond, I mean, it's a weird book. It's a murder mystery story about, again, this is before Da Vinci Code came out. You're doing a murder mystery about Jesus set in Paris? Okay. So I totally get it. They said, listen, we'll publish one issue. We'll see how it does. But, that's when I knew, when I talked to Jeff, that time in the Forbidden Planet, that's when I knew that it's going to be a series now. I made it. It's an ongoing series at Image Comics. So it was, great feeling.
I'm sure Image was happy about it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were like, hey, buddy, how you doing?
Right.
Your tone changed like very nicely, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of that had to do with Brother Matthew, with Eric and I putting that out just diligently every week for like a year, pretty much a year. And it took a lot of time away from the production of the comic, but 100% worth it. 100% worth it. Yeah.
And I also want to make it clear that this was monthly, this comic, versus Kickstarter. So a lot of people, they'll put out, 4 books a year on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong if you have a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
You're working on your thing, and then you do Kickstarter on the side because you just want to produce comics.
Yeah.
This was your job, is the point. Meaning that it's a little bit different when you have to go and actually do this, and this is your job, and so you're making it work, and it's that you're banging it out, and that you're typing away and lettering and writing and all that stuff, and then you're making the phone calls, and you're speaking to Eric J about how to do something, and then he's doing something, and you're speaking to a colorist, and that you're coordinating all of it. Is that this is your job.
That's right.
Person. And you're doing it monthly, which means that you have to commit, and then comic shops have to know that, hey, issue 1 came out, I got to order issues 2, 3, and 4, and then if you are planning, and I'm sure Image said, how many are you going to do this year? Yeah. So that they can then give that to Diamond for preview orders and all that stuff. It's not, because you have commitments to previews. And Diamond and other distributors, so they could order it and give that information to stores so they could stock it and stores can build pull lists. It's a very different mentality.
That's right. Yeah, I cannot believe how much things have changed and how much things have stayed the same. I mean, the direct market is still there. I really believe in the direct market. I love the direct market. With my new project I'm working on now, I'm still up in the air about so many things. So many things are up in the air about it. Nothing would make me happier than going with the direct market. People have been predicting the death of the local comic book store ever since I got into comics. And
I don't think it's coming. I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I hope not.
I think it's going to evolve.
That's right. Yeah.
I think comic shops, and obviously COVID is a little bit different. Yeah. So I think the 2 evolutions that need to happen is live sales for shops.
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah.
Every week, not every day, every week. Right. I think you can only, the saying is that you could kill a cow once or you could take its milk for the next 20 years. You'll make less money by milking your cow. Yeah. So I think if you do sales once a week, you're not destroying your audience. Right. You're not cheering, or butchering the sheep or the cow. Right. If you do it once a week, you're going to be fine. If you do it every other week, I think you're going to do even better because now people have, they don't feel like they're getting drained of their money, and then after a while, they will not show up.
That's right.
I also think more signings and things like that I think offering services like CGC pre-evaluation at shops, and also offering things where you have somebody who actually knows what they're doing. I also think more content that I'm doing. So I do a bunch of panels, and I run an entire Facebook Live podcast. I think shops need to do that, and they need to actually pay attention to people who do like PowerPoint presentations, whether that's online in a Zoom meeting or something else, or an in-store event that has nothing to do with a signing, but is an event. And I think that's where things need to go, because it needs to become an experience versus just selling me a comic book. Because I order from Midtown Comics, and I legitly get my comic books for like $2.15 or $1.94.
Wow.
The local shop cannot compete with Midtown, and the difference is that if I went to my local store, 25 books would be $100.
Right. Yeah.
If I go to Midtown, it's 60.
I am not, from like a business perspective, I am nuts about businesses. I mean, you can talk about the morality aside, just
it's not a business thing for me as a collector. The difference is that for $100, if I go through Midtown, I can get way more of what I want.
100%.
If I'm not even, and I'm obviously in the business of buying and selling comics, Zenoscope knows exactly what I'm doing, which is I do a lot of business with them, and I do a lot of other business with other, retailers. And I'm sure Midtown knows what I'm doing too. So it's not that hard to figure out. But even so, I read a bunch of comics. And if I could get 40% more for my money, I'm going to go to who's going to give me the best deal.
I am fascinated by places like Walmart or Costco, or places that are Asian auto manufacturers like Honda or Toyota, places that really try to drive value to the consumer. That's what interests me, and that's what I'm thinking of now with my new project. I think you hit the nail 100% on the head.
There are things in business.
Yeah, whatever creators do, or local comic book stores, you have to give value to the people, to your audience, to your consumer.
So I'll give a really quick position. So I just backed somebody's Kickstarter, a guy named Jamie Tyndall. Even people know who Jamie Tyndall is. So in his Kickstarter, you could back the physical reward for $10. What you got in your Kickstarter rewards was an 11 by 17 print, a pin, 3 magnets, 2 bookmarks. You signed all the books. And there was a few other rewards, I think like a mini print, 2 buttons, a die cut sticker, another sticker. We're talking about all this stuff. Now, all that stuff doesn't cost that much money, but all of a sudden, when he was reaching $70,000, $80,000 on Kickstarter, I feel that I'm getting a lot of value. Now, I bought 2 exclusives by Dawn Mateague and Elias Chazus for $40, but I thought I was getting a lot of value. Somebody else, and I'm going to not name it who it is, but his Kickstarter didn't have any rewards that are great, and it was like $20 with the shipping. And my issue is that, and I'm not trying to bash my friends here, but I'm like, you didn't bring much value when legitimately for $20 on Tyndall, I got quadruple what you offered, if not 5x. And so the thing about business is that you have to be the cheapest, the most expensive, or the most valuable.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm right now building a comic book investing class, and it's 19 plus hours. It's going to be anywhere from $250 to $300. So I want to be the most valuable. I'm delivering value, and I'm delivering you 19 hours of my time, and it's all modularly built. And I'm working on it, and I mean, I'm giving you everything I got. You're not paying anymore you're paying for my value that I'm bringing to the table. I mean, I'm going to be bringing you spreadsheets and checklists and things that you can legitimately print out at a con. And every book decision you make, you print out 20 of these sheets. You're going to figure out which books are good and which books aren't just by having 7 questions asked. So I'm being valued. And I think that's something that is super crucial right now.
I always come back to what Kermit the Frog said in one of he's going through all these difficulties. He's trying to get, I think it's a Muppet Take Manhattan. He goes, all I want to do is make millions of people happy. That's really what he, I think about myself, why I started being a writer. I just want to entertain people and make them happy. I truly do it. It would make me I want as many people to read what I write as possible. And I want them to feel like I'm on their side. I truly do. I'm not just saying that. I truly do believe that. So yeah, I think that's it. That's enormously important to me going forward, being one of the good guys. I hope. I hope. So that is very much my mindset going forward with my new project. Yeah, yeah. Whatever form it takes. Yeah, yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in a second, but I do want to talk about Dynamite because you coming into Dynamite was big, and obviously you got to work on a very cool project, which I think is even bigger as a writer, and that is John Carter, Warlord of Mars.
Yeah.
And obviously that is a massive, iconic
yeah.
thing. It's a little controversial, but I think everybody's an adult in the room. I think everybody can say, okay, it's a story. And it's not about the Confederacy. It's legitimately just taking a character in that gets transported and basically has to do stuff on Mars and has nothing to do with that. I think we can all be adults in the room. And I think when people criticize that aspect of the story, I think they're just nitpicking. And that's not to get political. It's legitimately not about any of that. You have just taken a character. You could take a character from anything. You could legitimately take a Nazi and throw that Nazi into a situation. You could take, somebody from, Mongolia who was a Chinese suppressor. You could take Genghis Khan from something and throw him into a different situation. So obviously, dismissing that point, what was this like coming into this? Because Dynamite was sort of launching Warlord of Mars, and now we got this circumstance where we're sort of having the original story, but bunch of twists and a bunch of fun stuff going on and a bunch of adventures and things sort of building on top of each other and a lot of fun stuff going on with it and adding new things to it as well.
Right. Thanks. I couldn't agree more. It's not condoning the Confederacy or the transatlantic slave trade, which are awful, which are disgraceful, awful things. These are things that are part of the original story, and it would be wrong, in my opinion, to try to hide those things or cover them up. A lot of the writing that I like, Edgar Allan Poe, that one of his great stories, The Gold Bug, is just virulently racist. Virulently racist. H.P. Lovecraft, virulently racist in places. We have to take artists, the good and the bad, and like you said, I think that we're all.
I mean, look at Al Cap.
Right.
Al Cap. Right. What a great artist, great mindset for comics, a bastard of a human being.
Right.
Guy, every comic artist and every comic writer has to think Al Cap. Undeniably.
That's
horrible human being, but you can acknowledge that somebody's a horrible human being or has flawed traits. Right. And at the same time say, look, this is what it is, but that character, John Carpenter, it's a very iconic character. Right. And it's this idea that, the story is not about that and what he does on Mars and fighting and taking what Edgar Rice Burroughs did with that story and evolving it and taking it and going. And obviously anybody who's read any of this Warlord of Mars stories, super great, and it's an amazing adventure space story that legitimately has expanded sci-fi. So again, what was it like to really have a lot of fun with that? Because
I could not believe how much I loved the original novels. They are so much fun. They're so imaginative. I, of course, heard of Edgar Rice Burroughs before. I couldn't believe how phenomenally fun and readable the stories were, despite having been written at so long ago. That's actually my favorite period of writing, right before World War I. It's my absolute favorite period of illustration as well. So it was enormously fun. We tried to acknowledge some of the issues with the original source material, with John Carter being a member of the Confederacy. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to live in a world where we're only allowed to watch pure movies and pure things, and we have to have purity tests for artists or for stories. I think we're all hopefully smart enough and wise enough that we can acknowledge the flaws of these original writers.
I think it is the way I view it is that everybody has to acknowledge they're an adult. Okay,
that's right. Yeah,
it means that you don't dismiss something, but you also don't run away from it.
That's right.
And so you can watch something that is not great, but it has relevance, and that it is important to have these discussions and have things in there and not just dismiss concepts.
Right.
Because once you start dismissing concepts, I'm a big fan of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and
Right.
that entire thing where, I interviewed Dennis Kitchen, who was kind of the founder behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that speech should be, dismissed or censored. Right. The answer always is to write more.
That's exactly right.
Because the second you start eliminating stuff, I had got to ask Justice Scalia a question when I was in school.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And he had to think about it. And it was about the issue of banning the selling mature video games in California. Mm. And he said there's no intrinsic value on peeing on a cop.
Right.
And setting a cop on fire and peeing on him. But the second you start limiting speech, it becomes a very slippery slope. And so the way I view it is, and he had to think about it for like a good 45 seconds before he answered me. And the rest of my class was thoroughly impressed, including my professor at the time. He had to think about it, and he actually had to come up with it because he was the deciding person on that case.
Wow.
So talk about a crazy circumstance where you have a very conservative, genius Supreme Court justice.
He's smart, dude. Yeah.
One of the smartest Supreme Court justices out there.
Yeah.
Writing a very liberal freedom of speech discussion, disagreeing with the fundamentals, but agreeing with the law of it. And so that's how I view John Carpenter and Carter and all that stuff, because I do think that the answer is to acknowledge it, but then say, okay, he's doing X, but now we have him saving people on Mars and freeing Mars and ending colonialism to some degree on Mars and ruling it and having an adventure with his friends.
Exactly right. This is, to me, one of the most fascinating things about the Warlord of Mars series. If you read the Tarzan, I did some Tarzan adaptations also. The Tarzan stories are virulently racist. Racism is pretty profoundly baked into the Tarzan stories. So, it just is. But the Warlord of Mars series, it has the exact opposite message. I mean, I just feel like Edgar Rice Burroughs, again, I'm an incurable optimist, like I said. I have to feel like all these people, whether it's Edgar Allan Poe or Robert E. Howard or Edgar Rice Burroughs, on their deepest level, when they get past the historical reality, they're not racists, and they know that it's wrong and it's bad on some deeper level, even if they indulge in it sometimes. So that's very much what I took away from the Warlord of Mars stories. It's a very powerful story about the universality of the human experience, and it's about freedom. It's about freedom. Yeah.
And then you also got to write his princess stories, 400 years in the past. And so you got to write this while you're working on Warlord of Mars and all the different stories surrounding that. And obviously, I'm probably going to get her name wrong because I'm really bad at pronouncing names. But I think it's Deja Thoris.
I always pronounce it Deja Thoris. That just rolls off my tongue well. But,
Deja Thoris. So obviously, getting to write her stuff, and it's 400 years before John arrives, and everything that happens in Warlord of Mars. And so, what was that like? Because you have some freedoms on what she can do and what she can't do, and where she could go in her emotions. And if she's got a love interest from 400 years, it doesn't really affect Warlord of Mars per se, but you also can't cut off her arm at the same time.
That's right. One of the things we talked about, obviously it's not the Deja Thoris story. It's all about physicality in the human body, and it's supposed to be sexy and glamorous. So we just indulged that and embraced that 100%. There's a cheesecake aspect to it, which I'm not ashamed of in the slightest. I am enormously proud of what we did with the Deja Thoris stories. The art was phenomenal. God, I can't even remember the artist's name now. The coloring was beautiful. The art was so beautiful. Brazilian artist. Kills me. I can't remember his name.
Like Liu Antonio, maybe?
He was he's great also. He's from the Philippines. Yeah.
Stefan something maybe.
Oh, I can't. I'll remember.
Was it Robert or Roberto Castro? Because I know that he's done a bunch of stuff.
Another great one that I worked with on. I worked with so many great. I mean, it's one of the best things about.
I know some. Like, there's only so many people I know. Will Conrad.
Raphael. I have the books, but
Was it Will Conrad?
Will Conrad, I did some cull comics with. I just spoke to Will recently. Oh, Will is one of my favorite human beings.
I have to release his interview on my other show.
Oh, great.
Like 2 years ago. I've been a little bit backed up.
Okay, yeah.
And a little irresponsible. I'm the first person to say when I'm irresponsible.
No, hey, that's all right. That's okay. Yeah, Will is Will and I took, because I'm interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I developed an interest in Brazilian culture. So I love,
to even talk about this cheesecake aspect, because I like Dynamite, and my introduction to Dynamite was not the traditional route. I'm a cover guy. I love covers. And obviously J. Scott Campbell's done a bunch of covers for stuff that you've worked on. Obviously Joe Jusco, Alex Ross, Lucio Parlillo, another one that's done covers. And then
what an honor to have those covers and something you've. I mean, just.
So that's how I got into Dynamite. That people that I like, who, and it's a twofold, because obviously I'm always looking for people to interview, and I love cover artists, and I'm a Zenescope guy, exclusive covers. Dynamite follows a very similar trajectory with that. And then certain people that I know who cosplayers have been on Dynamite covers. Lots of Black was just on one, and she does Vampirella, and so her covers are awesome in cosplay and photos. And so Dynamite does a bunch of variant stuff. Some of it is cheesecake. They do some nudity. They do clothes. They do virgins. Dynamite just did the Dynamite series with like the Peanuts and Dr. Seuss. Awesome, and all that stuff, and all those mashups. And so obviously, when you have your series, Dynamite's doing a bunch of different covers, from incentives and black and whites and virgins and all that stuff. And obviously that's cool. And then you have Campbell and Ross doing covers and contributing some art as well. And so what was that like for you as a writer, that you now have a series that legitly Dynamite has put some serious firepower behind, and they've brought a lot of value, where you could get a Campbell, you get a Ross, you get a Virgin Campbell, you could get a Virgin Ross, you could get some nudity in there, and obviously maybe with Warlord it's a little bit different, but with the Dija Thoris, obviously you could get a new cover of her if you're into that. And so obviously it's a little bit different, because those people who are buying a $50 comic are not going to read it. But at the same time, they have the book in their hand, and they probably are buying a regular issue of it too to read.
That's right.
Digitally. So what is that like for you, knowing that, hey, it goes beyond now just, reading the book. It's they could legitimately put blank pages in the book and nobody would care. Nobody would know anything wiser. But even still, because that does help to fund the next issue and keep the series running. And as a writer, you have to be well aware of that, I would imagine. That because it's different than creator owned.
That's right. No, it's very different. And when I believe in the golden rule, the person with the gold makes the rules. So when it comes to Dynamite Comics, they're the ones putting the money on the line. So they make the decisions about it. And it's your job as a writer to be part of the team, and to do so cheerfully, and to do what they're asking you to do.
But even still, to get J. Scott Campbell in there, I mean, come on, that's awesome.
Just like I said, what an honor! What an honor to have those artists gracing a story that you wrote. I mean, I'm beyond words. I'm beyond words. I think we're entering into a strange period of where things are becoming more puritanical now, and that concerns me a little bit. I'm actually like I said, I'm religious. I'm a fairly socially conservative person. I think there's some English politician said it best. I'm a conservative at the breakfast table and a liberal in the House of Commons. And that's how I feel about myself with regards to my own conduct, my own life. I try to be pretty conservative.
I'm the opposite, where we're
really
totally liberal. I am very, very economic conservative.
Yeah.
I'm center, but I tend to lean right.
Yeah.
I'm not scared to say that, but
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with people doing whatever they want to do in their life as long as it doesn't affect me,
Yeah.
within reason.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you shoot a gun out in the open air and I'm 5 miles away, well, that can affect me.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not saying the gun's going to fly out 5 miles away, but obviously, so I am the exact opposite. Where I'm also very atheist. I am very agnostic. I'm not too sure if I'm agnostic or atheist. But that I digress there. Where I just believe in basic common sense principles.
Yeah.
Collectively, and I also think that we are. I agree that we are entering a very, very weird time in comics where that's why I'm totally cool with Dynamite doing nude covers, because it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
However people want to spend their money, and if that keeps Dynamite alive so that you get another gig, I don't really care, because I am in the business of buying and selling comics, and the more options I have to buy something, the better off I'm going to be to make money. And people want this stuff, and I tend to deal with cheesecake books all the time.
Right. Yeah. There's a long history of, that kind of art, and long live freedom of expression. That's what I think. That's what I think. So yeah.
And I just love the fact that with Dynamite, they have typically an A, B, and C cover that's basic for a lot of books, and then they'll have a variant like I'll give the example, the Dynamite books with the Peanuts. It was a regular version, a virgin, and a black and white. Those books were only like $1 or $2 more. And so for me, it's really cool because I'm going to be throwing a bunch of this stuff up on Instagram in the next 6 weeks that I got a while ago. And I thoroughly enjoy this type of work and this type of stuff where I can get a really cool virgin or a really cool cover for $1 or $2 more. And sometimes it's the same price as just the cover A, which is awesome for me. Like those cosplay covers that they do.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they're the same price as cover A. Yeah. And so I was like, dude, I'm in. And especially when I'm interviewing certain people and I know their covers and stuff. So it's very, very cool in that regard for me.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that we are in an interesting time as far as what's being put out there and how promiscuous things are going to get. Yeah. And while I deal with cheesecake and I love comic art, I do think it's going to be very, very interesting because I do think lines are going to be crossed sooner rather than later.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
And obviously we mentioned the Tarzan book because at a certain point you got Dejah Thoris coming out, you got Warlord of Mars happening, and you're working on that, and then Tarzan and John cross over.
Yeah,
because you work on a bunch of Tarzan stuff, and then obviously that Tarzan stuff is interesting in its own right. I think, what was it, only like 15 issues?
Yeah, it was. I can't even remember. I think it was 12, 6, something like that. Yeah.
And obviously it's dealing with Tarzan, and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously he's fighting some apes, and it's definitely Planet of the Apes like the original. I think is a good way to put it to some degree. With what's underlying it and what he's dealing with it and all that stuff. But it's also dealing with some cool stuff too, where we basically have Tarzan and his wife's pregnant, and now they're on the coast of Africa dealing with a pretty serious fight or flee type of life position without the option of fleeing.
Right.
So that's kind of what's going on, and then obviously that sort of plays out in its own right, and that's another Edgar Rich Burroughs story.
Edgar Rich Burroughs, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tarzan is, again, you read the source material, virulently racist. Virulently. I think one way to solve it is, I believe, Warren Ellis wrote kind of a Tarzan, it was almost like a deconstruction of Tarzan, where Tarzan is just a unreconstructed racist and a colonialist, and he's just a total villain. That's definitely one way to handle the problem. I don't really want to. I want Tarzan to be a good guy and a hero, and can you do that and address all the issues of the original source material and change Tarzan so that he's
it's called being a writer.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. So that was the challenge for me. I didn't want to. I don't want to make Tarzan into a villain. That's just not doesn't interest me. Yeah.
And I think with Dynamite, because unlike DC, Marvel, Dynamite is like a dark horse, where I do think the people who come to Dark Horse and come to Dynamite and come to Zenescope, they're looking for mature books.
Right.
Image, I feel, is sort of a flip, a coin toss, where I think that you can have a very mature book at Image.
Right.
But I don't think Image gets that same, position and that same label. Like when I think of Dynamite, I expect something to go a certain way.
Right.
Now, I don't expect, full nudity in a book with a Dynamite book, but I expect, Red Sonja, she's cutting people, she's killing people.
Right.
I expect a certain level of violence. I expect a certain level of maturity to persist, if that makes any sense. With the Dark Horse, I expect a certain level of Zenescope. I expect a certain level of maturity. With Image, The Walking Dead, for the most part, while it's a zombie thing, I don't have a kid, but if I had a 12-year-old kid, I would be more than comfortable handing them a copy of The Walking Dead. That doesn't bother me, where I don't think there's anything inherently bad in The Walking Dead that a 12-year-old can handle decently. Maybe there's a few scenes in The Walking Dead that would alarm me, but overall, I think a 12-year-old could handle it. I would not feel comfortable giving my 12-year-old Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, as it's labeled, and not because it's a much more mature book. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving my 12-year-old either Warlord of Mars. It's a much more mature book, and it has nothing to do with the racism that might be underlying in there, or even the issue of the Confederacy. I just think that those books, maybe they're meant for a 15-year-old. Right. And it's just the audience, and I feel like Dynamite understands their audience, and I feel like they aim at a certain person. And then Dark Horse does the same thing. And I'm not saying Dark Horse. Dark Horse just released the Overwatch books. And I think those books, and I'm reading them. I think they're pretty okay for a 12-year-old, in my opinion. But at the same time, you also have other things in Dark Horse like Sin City. Yeah, that's right. You don't want to give Sin City to a 12-year-old. No, right. Unless your parents aren't paying attention. That's right. They're really cool parents. I was reading things when I was 12 years old that ultimately it benefited me, but
permanently warped my mind too. Yeah.
Probably not appropriate for what my age, by far.
I know. Yeah. I think when you go to adapt a story like Tarzan or Red Sonja or whatever it might be, you have to stay true to the spirit of the story. And if you don't, I think you're asking for trouble. And you have to accept the stories for what they are and try to bring that to life and try to evoke that. So yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then even going further off this, because obviously John and Tarzan meet, and you had the ability to write that thing, and that's a cool book in its own right, where I don't know if it's quote unquote canon with Dynamite, or Dynamite wanted a crossover, which is cool because everybody's doing crossovers now. I mean, that's right. Look at what's coming out. We have My Little Pony and Transformers crossover. Right, yeah. I mean, let's be realistic here. Yeah. Who doesn't want to read that book? Right, that's right. I'm stoked for it. Yeah. And I love the Transformers. I love My Little Pony. I own Hasbro stock, so I'm all for it. There you go. Yeah, that's right. In this book. Yeah. I have a vested interest in this book. I'm not going to pretend. Mm-hmm. Anyhow. What was that like, though? Because we do have a very serious story between John, Tarzan, and their wives. Obviously, shit's hitting the fan. Yeah. Both John and Tarzan's life is on the line. Their wives' life / girlfriends, princesses are on the line. Yeah. Earth is on the line. Mars is on the line. There's millions of miles in between is on the line. And there's a lot of stuff going on with this, and it's kind of a cool book in a lot of ways.
I really appreciate that. I had another. I don't know why it didn't happen. I don't write for Dynamite anymore, but it was right around the time I was transitioning out of writing for Dynamite. I had another 6 issues that I was really looking forward to writing, but this has happened to me a lot in my career. I've started a lot of series, And just been really excited for the potential and the possibilities for the series as a long-term project. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't materialize. So that was one of those stories. I am just chagrined about all the things that could have been with that one. Yeah.
I think it could have gone in a lot of ways, and I think there could have been another issue, but you know what is, things change, things get fluid.
That's right.
With comics are getting very, very interesting with company and everything, and obviously I think the waters are very, very fluid right now.
Yeah, no, they really are. They really are.
Yeah,
exciting. I mean, there's a lot of potentials. There's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunities now for creators, I think. So we'll see. These are all things I'm grappling with my new projects. So we'll see what happens. It's a really exciting time to be a creator. Yeah.
And so I want to table that discussion about fluidity for 1 second, because obviously I do want to talk about your new project, and I think it's the Band of Crow.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And I know it's in its infancy, so yeah. I don't want to push too hard, but what is the concept? Because I'm shooting in the blind here on this one.
Yeah. No, thank you for mentioning it. I first had the idea around 2006. So I've actually been working on the story for a very long time. I wrote it as a novel. That was a pretty painful experience for me personally, actually. Yeah, trying to find an agent, a book agent, trying to find a publisher. That didn't happen. But you know, I know I'm onto something when I have difficulty with finding an outlet for a story, and I still believe in it. So I believe in this story really, really, really profoundly. I've worked very, very hard on it. I actually was working with an artist for 4 years on it, and the artist and I had to part ways. So I'm starting over from scratch with a new artist. He is extremely talented. He lives in Malaysia, of all places. I know him through my work for Legendary Comics. So he's a friend of an artist with whom I'm really good friends with, and who's also based in Malaysia. I could not be more excited about this story. Could not be more excited.
So obviously we got all this exciting. So what is the basic premise? Because that's what I'm curious about. Where is it going? And so what is that thing? Without giving too much away, because I don't want to hold you to anything as it's being built out.
No, it is a fantasy story. It is straight up fantasy. It's not a mix 'em up. It's not a genre bender. It's not steampunk. It is a straight up fantasy story. It came out of Rex Mundi, actually. You know, I started researching the origins of Christianity and the origins of the Roman Empire around the time of when Christianity was first coming into existence. And there was this religion called Mithraism, which Christianity, you know, borrowed a lot from Mithraism. And all the sources said, yeah, it's an Indo-European religion. It's Indo-European. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean, Indo-European? That's a strange term. And I ended up going way down the rabbit hole about language origins and cultures origins. And there's this mysterious group of people called the Indo-Europeans, and English is an Indo-European language. So is Spanish. So is Hindi. You go back and look at these, the Hindu religion. It's very clearly related to the Norse religion. So the undeniable conclusion is that the Norse religion and the Hindu religion are clearly both come from some common lost source, some common lost cultural source. And if you compare all these different religions and languages and cultures, these really interesting themes start coming up. Really, really interesting themes. So that was very much the idea behind the Band of the Crow, to write a fantasy story, but to hopefully tap into these really, really deep level, the deepest level of all these myths that shape our that shape pop culture, that shape our contemporary culture today. Yeah.
And obviously this is in its infancy, you're starting over. And one of the things that you already mentioned is that you're struggling exactly how to, you know, release it and get it out there, because let's be realistic here, and this is just a touch of reality, is that comic books and how comics are distributed, it is very fluid at the moment. Between Kickstarter, obviously with conventions not running, San Diego's not running, all these other cons saying, hey, we're coming back in the summer. And I'm like, good luck with that.
Right, we'll see. We'll see.
Vaccination, no vaccination. Let's be realistic here. And I know a bunch of people. And look, I'm a strong believer. Do what is best for you. I'm not going to tell somebody not to go to a convention if they're not vaccinated to wear a mask. Because I understand that people are hurting, especially writers, artists, people signing. They're hurting. People are depending on their income. Especially some people who might have been screwed in the comic world back like 30 years ago might be charging $10 a signature and might do all right, and it might be an income for them in some way. So I get all of that, but obviously the fluidity has changed where what was it in 2020? DC was down for 4 months. Marvel was down for 4 months. Like, I don't know if Dark Horse and Dynamite were down. I know that Image might have been delayed. I know Zenescope sort of changed the way they do things a little bit. And obviously all these cons have big booths at, all these con companies have big booths at cons. And well, if you're not going for a year while you're saving money at X, you're not making Y, on it. And so obviously that changes the fluidity. So what do you notice? Because you're in the industry. I'm obviously a spectator. I'm a purchaser. My investment strategy as a buyer of comics, and Zenescope runs a lot of virtual cons, which has allowed me to make a lot more money actually, to get comics ever faster than before. And I wish DC and Dynamite, Dark Horse, I wish they would all do it. Because I would be able to get what I want. I'd be able to get exclusives, not really cheaper, but easier. I have more access because the margins haven't really changed. It's the access to those items. But I don't know what it is like to be in the comic world. Because prior to 2019, things were changing as they sat. But obviously 2020 changed the entire game with everything that I just mentioned. And then obviously, I don't know, Kickstarter, for those who don't know, I think last September there was 178 projects in a month on September. And I think in 2020 there was like 230 or 228. So obviously, I'm talking about a 50 project increase. But it's a big deal. And one of the only sectors that's grown on Kickstarter is comics in 2020, and it's continuously growing. And so that means a bunch of other problems as well, where more projects you have up there, there's just less money to go around.
That's right, exactly.
More projects are going to fail. More projects might pass too, but just get across the line versus double or tripling. So obviously, I want your entire perspective on that because you're in the industry and I'm not.
Well, to be honest, here's what happened to me. I pretty much all but walked away from comics for a long time. I'm coming back now to it. I feel like Rip Van Winkle. Things are very, very different now from how they were back then. The publishing landscape.
When did you walk out? Just so we get a perspective.
I've always been. I can't say I've always had one toe in. I have just actually just recently. I have decided that I'm not going to be doing any more for hire work. I mean, talk to me, guys. Someone wants to talk to me, but it would have to be a pretty special project for me to take it. I really want to focus on the Band of the Crow. But this is basically in 2000 and maybe 2010 or something like that. I walked away. So yeah, things are very, very different now. I think things are very, very bitter. I think that there's a very intense political environment in comics right now, which is all the more bitter because.
I'll give an example. There are people who have been on my other show who are conservative who basically said we can't talk about this because if I'm found out, I will be out of a job tomorrow. Okay, I'll give another perspective. Danny O'Neill, rest in peace, was very, very progressive. Arguably the best Batman editor ever. Chuck Dixon, who was writing Nightfall at the time, which was a massive series where Batman's back gets broken. Chuck created Bane. So now Chuck is very conservative. Chuck wrote the book Clinton Cash for Breitbart. That should give you an idea where they stand politically on opposite sides. No problem. Working. And that was in the 90s in DC. That environment does not exist today. And before anybody attacks me, and hopefully this doesn't hurt you, one of the things that if you're on the left or you're on the right, you should be very concerned about that, because that conflict only creates division. It does not create unity. And I'm not trying to preach or anything, but having that in your workplace determines what gets published, what doesn't get published. And if you have problems where somebody doesn't feel comfortable to speak at their job because of their political beliefs, or that they know their political beliefs are going to cost them, that's going to affect what stories get published.
That's right.
And even you might say, well, why is Batman a little bit tamer? Or why isn't he ruthless? Or why isn't he this vigilante, character that Batman is supposed to be? That could very well be the reason why.
That's right. Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt and add to that.
No, it's a real concern. I'm still trying to orient myself to it all, because I didn't expect that coming back into it. So I still feel a little bewildered by this and everything. So speaking as a professional or a former professional, someone, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Yeah, it's ugly, and it doesn't feel very warm and fuzzy, does it? It doesn't feel very warm and fuzzy to me.
Did you also feel, though, that margins have gotten tighter, and that there's also a lot more issues of money? Obviously AT&T, which I own their stock. I'm not going to pretend. Obviously they have a shift in their business where I feel like a lot of the comic stuff now, the question becomes is that how is this going to affect the character? How is this going to affect us with making movies and pulling in billions of dollars on something like the Joker, where you can't just, do something controversial, because now it might cost us legitimately $1 trillion.
Right.
And also now intellectual property is worth a lot more than it used to be worth 30 years ago.
This is what I'll say. I have noticed in my own life, irrespective of all this other stuff, which is important, when I do things myself and take the initiative and do things myself, that's when good things have always happened for me. I've done a lot of for-hire work, which I'm really proud of. I feel like I'm in a place right now where I need to do the story that I feel like I want to tell. And I feel like if I can do that, that's how good things are going to happen for me.
I feel similar with this, in which that, I got offered that somebody would help me get guests, and they want me to be part of their group. And even though I could do it once a week, I don't really want to push somebody else's material per se, in which that I want the freedom to do whatever I want with this show, because I can't run an interview with chains on me. Right. It doesn't work. And that doesn't mean that, if somebody hired me and I was an on-air personality, that I wouldn't pull the line per se if the money was good, but it's not going to be the same as this.
So there you have it. There you have it. I don't want to get involved in the politics. That's getting more and more and more difficult, in my opinion. And it doesn't feel warm and fuzzy to me. I don't think, regardless of the politics, nothing good has come from my life by prostrating myself to big companies and hoping that they will notice me. I think entrepreneurialism has never been more important. You've got to go out there and make something happen yourself and make it so that they come to you.
and I think 2020 has proven that with Kickstarter.
That's right.
I think Kickstarter has been very much the secret sauce.
Yeah, that's right.
I was joking with you earlier when I said, well, Image might have some serious competition.
Yeah.
My interview before this one, one of the things is that he's trying to get it's a company called Comic Distro, and they're trying to get a bunch of indie comics into comic shops.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I'm going to be really pushing that hard in the next few days, and that is coming out, or it's out, but it's going to be distributed the right way. And I think that is what Image's biggest threat is. I think it's DC's biggest threat, because also all these indie comic creators who are telling great stories. I have a friend who basically combined Cthulhu with the Wizard of Oz, and Cthulhu invades Oz.
Cool.
Tell me you don't want to read that story.
Awesome.
Like Cthulhu, or you like the Wizard of Oz. I say, hey, what the hell's this book?
Right.
There's a bunch of stuff. It's I just backed a project by AEW. I'm a big wrestling fan. It's called Butts and Seats.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be breaking 90,000 today, and I got 23 days left. And it's great because it's Dirk Manning, and I know Dirk Manning is very much indie. I don't think he's a big big name, but this is going to make him a big name, and I think that.
I know Dirk, actually. I know I'm fond of him. I've known him for a while. I know he's been working at this for a long time. That really warms the cockles of my heart. That really warms the cockles of my heart. And
so obviously a lot of people have helped push this book, like Cody Rhodes, because it's AEW and it's their baby. But the fact that, and what's crazy is that they've legitly like had to add all these stretch goals in, and they've done all this crazy stuff. And it's an awesome thing when this book's going to do like 150, 200,000 easy. And every wrestling fan is super stoked for it, and I'm excited for it. And so I think that what the real competition, I think Kickstarter is the secret sauce to all this, because now it really isn't political, where anybody can do anything they want, and all you have to do is tell stories.
That's right.
Even Indiegogo is the same way, where like Keenan White has worked on projects, like he's done 60,000, and that he's been a part of, and it's like, I think that it's not political.
Right.
I think that it's great, and you can do whatever you want, more or less, as your story, and you only have to answer to delivering your books. You don't have to answer to anybody else.
That's right.
I think that's the biggest fall of Marvel and DC and maybe even Image.
Yeah. We will see what happens. We may be entering a time of rebalancing. I hope so. I don't even think we're going to get rebalancing. I think we're going to enter the era of Kickstarter, the era of self-publishing, the era of the big two are going to lose even more, positions. In 2000, I think, well, I don't even remember. Maybe it was 2011. Image gained 11%, and DC and Marvel lost 11%. Wow.
And I think we're going to be entering that in 2022, 2023. And I think it's going to be coincide with a few other events beyond just comics. And we talk about the Great Reset. Everybody, I don't think the Great Reset is what people are going to expect, and I'm going to view it. There has to be a better word, and I should coin it. But I think there's going to be a big shift in the way things are done. Yeah. And I think a lot of shifting is going to happen in the next 2 years, including in comics and media and all sorts of stuff. And I'm very excited for it on a personal level, because as a consumer of this stuff and as an investor, I sort of see where things are going. Yeah, and I'm very excited for it.
I'm excited too. Ever since we fell out of the tree, people have found a way. People have found a way to get the stories in front of people. So there's always hope. There's always hope.
And obviously, I do want to get your opinion on cons and where that's going really quickly, because obviously, while vaccinations are going out there, I'm not going to a con until 2022. Yeah, I don't think, and this is my opinion, because I always state my opinion first, so people feel more comfortable. A bunch of cons, they say they're running. In August, I think there are two big problems. I don't think vaccinations are going to be fully rolled out. And even though Biden said, "Oh, we're going to get 200 million out there," I think it's going to be a longer road.
Right. We'll see. Yeah. The proof of the pudding will be in the tasting, won't it? I hope we get that to that place. For me, I take the pandemic seriously. I think it's important to mitigate the risks, especially to people who are high risk, like people who are elders. I mean, they are our elders, and they're the most at risk for this. So we have to be conscientious.
And then there's a good population of the U.S. that can't get the vaccination. Right. Not like physically can't get the vaccination, get their hands on the shot. They can't take the shot because it will kill them. And so that's a whole nother problem, where you could be vaccinated, but your kid might not be able to get the vaccination, and that becomes a bigger issue collectively. For the short term. The long term, it's not a big issue per se. In the short term, it's a big issue. And also, the economic damage, I think, is something that people are forgetting. Because if you're a comic artist doing commissions, all of a sudden, if we get to go back to cons but nobody has any money, like it doesn't matter that we're back at cons. It's the issue now that nobody can afford to buy your commission, or you're going to have to go cheaper. And then all of a sudden, and look, I've been a big proponent that I think things have to get cheaper. I think that some of these comic creators who are charging $25 for a signature for grading have to start reducing their prices a little bit. And I'm hoping for that to occur out of COVID. And I'm hoping that they say, oh man, people can't afford $15 now; they can only afford $10. I think that's a good position.
Here's my bottom line with conventions. For me personally, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to go to conventions. I've never made money at conventions. I've seen them get more and more and more and more taken over by big media, which is fine, but there is no way I can compete with those people. I can't do it. You feel like a cockroach getting crushed underneath somebody.
There are very few people. So I'll give an example. Is that there's a guy named Elias Chazus, and he's a really fast commission artist. So he could be paying out like 12 commissions in a day.
Right.
And when he's charging anywhere from $200 to $400, and you're banging out 35 commissions at a con, and your table costs $600, and you're bringing in $9,000, makes sense.
Right.
Because people want to get a commission by him.
Right.
And he has a fun time, and he did one for me. And then I gave a range for a reason. So I don't want to give the exact number because it changes. But the idea is that you're a writer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's nothing against writers, but like if you're an artist or you're charging $400 for a commission and you could bang out like 10 of them in a day, and that you can do $8,000 worth of commission work and your table's $800, and then your hotel room is like another like $300, right. And so you're spending $1,100 to make $8. It's a no-brainer.
Right. That's right. So for me, again, Oren, the artist I'm working with, lives in Malaysia. How the heck are we going to make it work financially for us comic book conventions? So for me, I just don't think, when you start doing something like this, it's a lot like looking for a house. I know you're looking for a house. You just have to rule certain things out, certain neighborhoods or towns or whatever out. For me, I do not think that convention.
Move for my job first, and then
that's right. Okay.
See, I thought about it. I've done it the smart way.
Yeah, good for you.
My job first, and then I'm going to go backwards instead of going forwards. Because all of a sudden, based on my income with my job, and then based on how close my house is, so I will spend an extra, $30,000 if my commute is 10 minutes versus my commute being an hour.
Right.
Because in the long run, I can make up those $30,000 in 50 minutes every single day. And my happiness will be much better. Or conversely, maybe I'll live a half an hour away if it's a better, safer neighborhood, or there's a Starbucks at the corner.
It's all about the cost benefit analysis. It's exactly what you're saying. For me, in my position right now, maybe this will change. I don't think that I get great value out of a convention. So
I've been to cons and I've done presentations. I don't get any followers out of it. I get a free ticket. I don't have to pay the $180 because I bring one of my parents with me, so they could film my presentations, which is super smart. But I don't get much economic value, but I also don't pay $180, which then goes into other stuff and signatures. So the only value I get out of it is I get a free access into a con.
Right.
But I have never gained any followers from a convention. And on $20 Facebook ads, I can pull in 50 people to like my Facebook page. I can pull in like 600 click-throughs through an ad or something that I want to push, whether that's a podcast or something else. So legitimately for a fraction of that price, I can pull in more audience.
Right.
So,
like you said, things are changing for all these people. And, the way things are today may not be how things are tomorrow. And all of these problems or trends that we've identified, people might want to be careful about the people who are benefiting right now may not be the people who benefit in the future.
I think that there's going to be a rude awakening for cosplayers. I think a lot of stuff, and I like a bunch of these cosplayers. I know a bunch of them. They're very nice to me per se, but I also think that there is a bunch of shifts about to happen in society, and I think the people who have skills are going to come out on top.
That's right.
And also the people who don't have everything in the same basket are going to come out on top.
That's
and
right.
I think that there's going to be a real awakening, and I'm very excited because I'm starting to shift my positions. I mean, this entire show, as of yesterday, I did 130 interviews in a year.
Good for you. Wow.
It's not a joke anymore. There's a reason why my yes rate is like 85%, which is crazy. And there's a reason why what I think is going to happen is people who actually accomplish something during 2020, like I did. I did 90 from March to December in 2020, and I did 40 in my 41st one this year so far. And then the last 3 months, which is ludicrous in its own right. I think those people, when all this shift happens, have all the real skills that are going to be needed in this new world.
That's right. Yep.
We're in a new world, and I don't mean like a nuke blast happened and it's zero killer time.
Right. Yeah.
See what I did there? See what I did?
Thank you. Hey, good. That's going. Yeah.
But I digress. I think that there's going to be a massive shift, and I think a bunch of people who are not ready for it are going to sort of be flat on their ass.
Yeah. God, I hope so.
I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it because it's going to be so interesting, and it's super interesting, and we're starting to see it already with a bunch of people. But on that note, and we've been talking for almost 2 hours, I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Like I said, I feel like Rip Van Winkle, so being on the show is an enormous honor. Thank you very much. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Arvid the Twit. You can find me on Facebook. I'm not as active on Facebook. I am Instant Arvid on Instagram, although we're going with my artist's Instagram feed for the Band of the Crow. I have a link to all that stuff up on my Instagram and on my Twitter. But for me, primarily Twitter, at Arvid the Twit. That's me. And every follow I appreciate from the bottom of my heart. This has been a really disorienting retransferring back into comics. So it has been just great reconnecting with people on Twitter, and I love it. Give me a follow.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been saying, and I'm sure everybody who watches this show is getting sick of it at this point, and believe me, I'm getting sick of saying it, so I wish people would do it so I can stop saying it here, is that you have to support indie. You have to support your comic writers that you like. You also have to support mainstream if you really like their work.
Okay.
And so what that means is that any book they have, you should buy. So obviously, Rex Mundy is on Amazon. It's on Comixology. A bunch of your work is on Comixology. So if you're like me and I like to read digital, it's just easy, and I'm running out of space to put my books. Obviously, you have to support that way. You have to read people's work. You have to buy people's work. It's super important to do so. Because obviously, if 10,000 people ordered Rex Mundy from Amazon, they would order more of them.
That's exactly right.
And so obviously that's super important from that perspective. And if you're in a position where things are financially tough and things are rough and you're just trying to stay alive and make sure that you're okay, your rent's paid, your mortgage is paid, gas is in your car is being paid, your wife's okay, your husband's okay, your boyfriend, girlfriend's okay, you got kids, make sure they're okay. You got a dog, make sure your dog's okay, make sure your pets are okay, electricity, water, food, shelter, all that stuff. Please take care of that first. Yeah. Also, make sure you have money, because while it appears we're starting to turn the corner out of COVID, I got a feeling we're going to get August, September, and November surprises in the next year. I just have a feeling on it. Yeah. And if I'm wrong, when you have the money saved up, it didn't hurt you tremendously. But if I'm right, you'll be prepared for it. So please make sure you have money for the next month after you are taking care of your current month. This way that if something does happen, you're going to be okay. And so if that's the case, please, as Arvid stated, follow people on Twitter. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just because somebody's not active on Facebook doesn't mean it's not helpful to like their Facebook page. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't follow them on Twitter. It doesn't mean you shouldn't follow their artists and them on Instagram. Super helpful, means a lot. Also engaging with them. If Arvid tweets something out, like it, retweet it, comment on it. super helpful. Share it. You know, it does make a difference, and it is super important. And especially if you're in the position where you can't go buy somebody's book or go pick up something they're doing or get a Comixology subscription and read this and comment on it. You know, if you're a reviewer, write a review on Rex Monday. Super helpful. You know, if you bought Rex Monday on Amazon and you didn't leave a review of it, write a review on Amazon.
Yeah.
Super helpful. You know, it's not going to cost you any money if you already have the book, or if you have a Comixology thing, write a review. I don't know if you could write a review on Comixology, but I know you could write a review on Amazon. Makes a big difference with good reads. So there's a bajillion ways how to support somebody, not economically, that does make an economic difference.
Yes, it's true. It's sincerely appreciated. Sincerely appreciated. Each and every one of those things you said, could not agree more, Andrew. Could not agree more. Thank you for mentioning it.
So obviously on that note, and I'm getting sick of saying it, everybody, so please just do it so I don't have to keep saying it. I have to come up with a new answer. I'm genuinely getting sick of it. I've said this 131 times in the last year and a day. So I'm a little bit tired of saying this, but on that note, I am going to give you the final word.
Okay. It is an enormous honor to be a creator and to have other people read your stories and to connect with them. And when someone tells me that something I've written has resonated with them, it's the greatest. It is the greatest form of payment I could possibly achieve. I didn't start writing comics because I wanted to make a lot of money, although that would be fine. Ultimately, the most meaningful thing for me in my existence, aside from being a father, is when my writing resonates with other people. Honest to God.